Welcome to Worth Live. Thank you all for joining this final episode of season 1 of this special education series with our partner New Profit, where we've been talking about re-architecting the future of philanthropy and social entrepreneurship. Firstly, I hope you and your loved ones are keeping well during what has and continues to be a challenging time for so many people at the moment. I'm Juliet Scott-Croxford, CEO at Worth Media, and I'm delighted to be joined by our special guest today, Carrie Schwab-Pomerantz, Board Chair and President of the Charles Schwab Foundation and SVP of Charles Schwab Co, and Jim McCann, Chairman of Worth Media and Founder and Chairman of 1-800-Flowers, along with speaker and co-host Tulaine Montgomery, Managing Partner of New Profit. Welcome, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Good to be here.
Great to have you all here. Thank you. Our intention at Worth is to create conversations that help inspire and inform and activate our community, many of whom are investors, funders, entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and leaders who want to leave a positive impact on the world and to help create a more inclusive and equal economy for the benefit of everyone. And we call that Worth Beyond Wealth. So we hope you enjoy this session. We hope you found this series valuable. We've been really heartened by the number of people that have been tuning in for this. The education series that we've been running has really been all about breakthrough impact. Philanthropy, like other sectors facing a moral reckoning on racial equity, continues to have a vital role to play in creating an America that lives up to the promise of its founding ideals. But we must overcome the bias and barriers that have existed in philanthropy for too long if we hope to unlock the ideas, the talent, the collaborations that can drive us towards a more equitable future. So over the past several months, Worth Media and the national venture philanthropy organization New Profit have collaborated to host a series of these events on how philanthropy can transform itself to meet this moment in America. Really, the objectives of this series have been to engage philanthropists on rethinking conventional wisdom in philanthropy, and particularly around racial equity, introduce them to proximate leaders in the social entrepreneur space who are leading transformative work on the ground across the country, and particularly in less protected Black, Indigenous, Latinx and rural communities, as well as build a multiracial, multi-ethnic coalition committed to re-architecting philanthropy. A few reflections on the series from me before we go to our other speakers. We really have been surprised and heartened by the response of this series. Each episode that we have been broadcasting, we've had over 150 philanthropists join for each event. And I think it really signifies to us that we can embrace this learning journey together and really build a multiracial coalition for change. I can't overstate how important it was for us to hear directly from so many of the proximate leaders who are leading change in less protected communities. And for too many of us, these leaders have been either underrepresented or outside our field of view and frame of reference when it comes to philanthropy. And I think, you know, a key message that's come out through and through each of these events has been that needs to change if we're to meet this moment and address these collective challenges that we face together. Tulaine, I just want to hand to you and say welcome back, and just get your thoughts, because we obviously started this series together on the first episode. A brief look at the arc of this series and some of like the key takeaways that you took before we get into this conversation and hear from Carrie and Jim.
Absolutely. Well, it's good to be back, Juliet, and we're back at it again, right? And as we think about today as a sort of bookend of what's been a really dynamic series of conversations. I mean, listen, this is the first time that New Profit has partnered in this way, and we're really excited about what we've learned. I think that there's a few themes, if folks who have joined us, and my sense from looking at the data is that many of you who are with us today, that you have joined us for several conversations. And so you've been on this journey, on this ride. We've been on this ride together. And there's a few themes that have really struck me. One is just the shared desire on our parts as entrepreneurs, proximate leaders, philanthropists, impact investors, business leaders. We all are hungry for something different, something better, something transformed. There's a real appetite for systems level change as opposed to incremental reform. And so it's been really encouraging to see that there's an appetite to really transform the impact of systems that have been inequitable for so very long, in some cases from their very origins. It's also been really exciting to see that, we've always had the capital that we need to address challenges. We've always had the ideas and intellect that we need, but we haven't always had the collective will. And one of the, silver linings of what has been an incredibly difficult year for so many of us in so many ways is, I believe that you can't heal what you don't feel. It's impossible to address or improve something if you don't acknowledge that it needs your attention, right? You can't move to sobriety if you don't acknowledge you have an addiction. Like, there's all kinds of ways of understanding the importance of noticing what Adrian in his conversation during the Future of Work session, or in the beginning of the series, he talked about that rock bottom moment. And one could argue that as a society, that as a country in the US, that we've hit, something that, could get worse. I don't like to tempt fate, but it's gotten pretty bad. And so that means that all of us are coming with the readiness to do something different. And I believe so deeply in our capacity as a country and as a globe and as a species, frankly, with that collective will to do something different, to be better, to learn, evolve, and change, that what's possible, 2021, I believe, is going to be a year of incredible transformation, where the struggling and suffering and loss that many of us have suffered, in some cases disproportionately this year, where the benefit and reward of it will be seen in the not too distant future. I think a couple of themes that came out is that we do know that even though we're all facing the same storm, we're not all in the same boat. This recession, this pandemic has laid bare what has been true and felt deeply for many communities for many, many generations, that, protections do not exist equitably across our society. But again, based on the collective will and readiness for transformation that we've seen demonstrated throughout this series, I do believe that we're ready to move the needle in ways that will mean we can be proud of where we stood when we look back in the history books.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think the collective will and the collaboration has come out so strongly. I love your phrase, you can't heal what you can't feel. And I think that's so relevant to what we've experienced this year as well. And just in reference to 2021, because we do intend to continue this series into 2021, as well as welcoming questions from everyone that's tuned in today. Please do use your chat function. Set it to all panelists and attendees, share your comments and questions for the speakers in there, and we'll weave those into the conversation. But we'd also like to hear from you in readiness for planning for 2021, and what additional opportunities for learning engagement would be most valuable to you when it comes to this subject around re-architecting philanthropy. So we will be sharing, I think, the first poll shortly, for you just to share your thoughts on how we want to experience that. Here it is. So yeah, if you could just take a look at that, what additional opportunities for learning and engagement would feel most valuable for you as we really think about how we build and continue this momentum into 2021. Thank you, Tulaine. So I'd love to go and welcome Carrie and Jim now. Just to sort of, this is an interesting week, obviously going into Thanksgiving. It's albeit very different, I think, Thanksgiving from what we've experienced previously. And Carrie, I just wanted to start by, if you could share what you're grateful for at this moment in time, obviously acknowledging that there's been so much trauma this year and obviously fear out there. Share, if you will, some of the things that you're grateful for right now.
Well, I mean, I guess I could say that I am very grateful that there's been a wake-up call in this country for the societal needs, to be honest with you. I've been working on financial literacy for 30 years, and what I've known all along is that it's a great equalizer, and that the lack of financial literacy takes away opportunity, and there's such an opportunity, and so it's a platform for trying to equalize society, and it's an easy one to do. So I'm excited by that. I'm also excited just by what's been brought to all of our attention about the racial inequality, and that finally, as a society, we're really stepping up, across sectors of society.
Thanks, Carrie. And we're going to get a bit more into how you've evolved your philanthropic endeavors shortly. Jim, share, if you will, your sort of observations on this year. I know you sort of used the phrase yesterday when we were talking, this is way beyond money, but would love your thoughts on, as well as sort of what you're grateful for as we're looking to the end of the year.
Well, looking to the end of the year, what I'm grateful for, Juliet, is on a personal level, I'm glad I'm not a restaurateur, because these poor people have been dealt a very tough hand. I just don't know how they do it, and I don't know how they keep their people working. And there are a lot of people hurting a great deal through this. And we're so fortunate. I live in a bubble, but it's a very nice bubble. And so it's very hard for us to complain, and we don't. In fact, there have been a lot of good things that have come out of this change in lifestyle, not out of the circumstance, but out of the change in lifestyle. And that is, we're lucky. We have 3 grown kids, and they're married well, and we have 6 grandkids, and they're all nearby. And so we don't get to hug them, and they don't come into the house, but we get to see them, especially when the weather was nice. So I'm very thankful there, and I'm thankful that the good luck, is that we're in a business at Flowers of helping people express and connect. And boy, is there ever more a need for good expression and connection. And on a macro level, I'm very happy that the election is behind us, because I was very concerned about the impact it would have on our public psyche and on our economy. But it seems like we're headed in a peaceful direction now. And I think that's a good thing for us. As I said to all of us here just a few minutes ago before we went live, I'm very concerned about the next 4 or 5 months. I think the numbers are scary. As recently as Labor Day, we had 26,000 new cases a day, and now we're over 180,000. If you do the math, 2 months from now, that's very, very ugly. It's ugly today, but it gets a lot uglier. So I'm concerned. But on the horizon is therapeutics are. There are 300 different therapies that are being tracked now by the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, all of which have some real promise to them. So I think the care for people who contract COVID will get better, a lot better. I think that the vaccine situation has improved so much. I wrote a piece for our own internal consumption, and I published it in Worth at your encouragement, Juliet, about. I said back at Labor Day that I thought a year from then, or next Labor Day, 21, that we'll feel like we have this COVID crisis essentially in our rearview mirror. I don't mean to say that it's going to be gone. And I don't think our lives will ever be the same. It'll change, especially for older folks. We're not going to change our habits any too quickly and go back to the way it was. We can't. But I hope from all of this crisis that it comes as, so if we get to next Labor Day, and we feel like it's better, COVID's not going away. It's out of the jar. It's not going back in. It's going to manifest itself in different ways. But our psyche will be better. We'll feel like we're on the mend. And indeed, the vaccines should be having a very positive effect on a very large number of people by next late spring, summer, and then feeling good in the fall. And I hope that what comes from that is a renewed sense of what's important. There's been a diminishing outlook in terms of conspicuous consumption. I hope that lasts. And if you look back at the history, when you see how people behaved after the Spanish flu in the late 19 teens, we had the end of World War II, we had the end of the Spanish flu, and we got the Roaring 20s. I think if we get to next fall, like it seems like we might, I think we could have an enormous lift in our spirit, in our economy, and in opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim. For all of you, as we think about philanthropy and some of the things that we've been covering throughout the series, we've been asking people to think about where we've fallen short in philanthropy, and particularly in sort of shutting out huge demographic and geographic groups and diversity of talent and expertise from funding, and commit to investing in more equity in our sector. And Carrie, you shared obviously the sort of the awakening that I think a lot of this country has had through this year. If you could share what it takes for a philanthropist to make a transformation in their mindset. And I think it would be great just to hear from you on, you've evolved your approach, and I know you've done a lot of work with women, with children in education. If you could share your sort of journey, your philanthropic journey with us.
Yeah, so I was thinking about it. You talk about an evolution of a philanthropist, and to be honest with you, I was not a philanthropist. I was asked to be a philanthropist, and I do think that's what it takes, is to ask people. I had no idea. I was in my early 30s. I was, had little kids. I hadn't even had my whole family. And a friend of mine, I was living in Atlanta. She was also in finance, and she invited 8 of us to go to dinner and meet the head of the Atlanta Women's Foundation, which there's, women's foundations in every city where they fundraise for all sorts of different issues that women face. And basically introduced us to the organization. They asked if we would come together and raise $50,000 3 years in a row. And this is a lot of years ago. $50,000, oh my God. And we would raise it for women's economic security. And that night I went to bed and I tossed and I turned. And I tossed and I turned because for 2 reasons. One is, like I said, $50,000 at that time sounded like a lot of money. And never in my life have I ever asked anybody for money. And then, but the other was, there was like this burning light, that someone lit the match and it just boomed. And it was like, wait a minute, there's philanthropy to get involved with women's causes. I had no idea. And I was so excited. So anyway, I ended up raising my hand and saying, yes, I'll do it. Some of the other women didn't do it. It was overwhelming for whatever reason. And for those 3 years, I was the #1 fundraiser. Then I became the chair, and then I was launched into other nonprofits and so forth. And that kind of is what launched me. And when I did a speech once, and I titled it "Chips and Wine," and I titled it that because it's like chips and wine. You can't just have one, right? You can't have just one chip. Once you have one, you have to have more. And that's the same as philanthropy. Once you toe dip into it, there's no going back. It's so fulfilling, especially because we all have so much to give. And, I think, Jim, as you mentioned, it's not about money. We all have so much to give. And so that was I think being asked really is the big thing.
And Carrie, how have you adjusted your approach, particularly this year? How has that evolved?
It still remains the same, to be honest with you, very focused on financial literacy and the Charles Schwab Foundation. When I took it over about 18 years ago, I not rerouted it, but restructured it. So it was very focused on financial literacy because we can bring way more than money to the table. It's, based on our heritage. It's a collective passion for all of us. So we could give money, we can give time, we could give financial expertise. And so that continues on. That I will say, and this, I'm sure we all have experienced this, the rise of technology has been huge. It has forced us, even at Schwab. I think 20% of our employees could work remotely. We had to fast track it, so now that 95%. And that's what all the nonprofits are having to do. And that allows us to build volunteer programs for our employees and for our constituents to have better access, to reach more people, to bring on more volunteers and to serve more people.
Carrie, if I could follow up with you on that, when we had a chance to chat previously, you made that point, and it's been echoing with me since. And Tulaine, I think you have a similar reaction, which is there's it seems to me there's two big types of philanthropy. One is we give money to worthy causes, and that's good and it's wonderful and what makes our culture go around, our society go around. And then there's the kind of philanthropy you just spoke about, which Tulaine lives every day, which is more than money. It's, as you said, way more than about money, which is where you can get other benefits from it. That is, you can bring benefits beyond your money, the talent, the resources, the energy and creativity of the people in the firm. And by the way, the more you give out of that, the more you get back. What kind of an impact does it have on your culture at the company?
Well, I have to say, over the last 20 years that I've run the foundation, it continues to build and build. You know, we have what we call the National Volunteer Week, where our employees go out in groups. We purposely did this. We actually started right after 9/11 to bring our employees together. You know, it was such a dark time for our country. And even Schwab was financially impacted. We had halved our company, and I felt like we needed something to bring us together. So we created this volunteer. It was a volunteer day. Over the years, it's now a volunteer week so that more employees can participate. And it's one of those, we send out the email, it sells out right away. And 98% of our employees, or I'm sorry, 96% of the employees who participate say that it makes them want to refer Schwab as a great place to work. So you know, we use it as a carrot, you know, for coming to work at Schwab. You know, even through what's happened in the last year, my team, I'll be honest, is increasing its funding, its resources, people, and money, because the company feels it's so important right now for the communities, obviously, but also for our employees. They expect us to be there.
Tulaine, how do you build on that spirit in your programs? Because everything you do seems to be like what Carrie's talking about, where it's way more than money. Your comments recently were about, if I can't get somebody on the ground who owns this, whose personality evidences what they do, who lives by example, then you don't have any faith in its success. So you're at the application level, and that has to change a community when its leaders embrace a project you're behind.
Absolutely. I mean, I so appreciate that question, Jim. So, you know, we're humans, right? And, you know,
well, not all of us.
Well, you know, there might be a few exceptions, you know, but for the most part, you know, we're humans. Yes. And so humans are herd animals, HERD, not HURT, though sometimes we're hurt too. And what I mean by that is that we have everything in our physiology, everything in our psychological makeup, our very biology is designed for us to prioritize connection, because in connection, there is safety and there is longevity in life. And so, you know, I believe as a country, we've been feeling the pain of separation and disconnection. And sure, there are some people who thrive off of the polarity and feed it and you know, fan the flames. And that dynamic exists for a whole set of reasons that we're not talking about today. But primarily what I've found is talking to people of different identities and experiences is that human beings want to connect in ways that uplift all of us, that core desire exists. Now, there's a whole lot of systems and habits that make that hard to actualize, but that's been my experience. And I want to say a couple of things to your question specifically, Jim. One is that part of what is really important for us to notice, particularly this community where we're made up of philanthropists, business leaders, social entrepreneurs. This country is actually incredibly skilled at valuing the expertise of leaders who are proximate to community and to issues. We do it all the time in the private sector. Think about if you had a new product to launch, right? Or a new app to launch, or a new invention to, you know, mass produce and distribute for profit. The notion that you would have any chance of succeeding without first deeply knowing and understanding the preferences, habits, and traits and resources of your consumer base, we don't even entertain it in the private sector. We know that understanding our customer in that context and designing with our customer in mind, designing, in fact, led and guided by our customers' preferences is the only way to win. We get that. Our whole private sector model is built on that core premise. We allocate resources for research and development. We dedicate resources and talent to spread the word. And we listen to our customers because we know that is essential in order to thrive and to profit. But then
when you say that, Tulaine, give us an example that's in your mind
Sure.
of a program that you got behind that you feel really good about.
Yeah, I will get there, but I want to finish the theme here. What I want to
Sure.
note is, because I love it, it's all about the examples and the stories. What we do though in the social impact space, and I think this is an important point for this audience, is we often behave as if and design structures as if it's even possible to identify the most impactful, sustainable organizations and models without first listening and adapting and being guided by the communities we want to support. If in one sector, you need to listen to your consumer in order to design something that will thrive and grow, then why would we not apply a similar expectation and requirement in the social impact space? So I just wanted to name that. But to your point, there's so many examples. I want to offer one example that I'm really excited about, an organization that's in the new profit portfolio, our systems change portfolio, called Girl Trek, Girl T-R-E-K. Girl Trek, as of last week, reached its goal of enrolling 1 million Black women who are actively involved in walking and leading in their communities. It's incredible. It is the largest network for Black women's health on the planet, and it is actually now a global movement. It is led by two phenomenal leaders, Morgan Dixon and Vanessa Garrison, and they have been able to, by building a set of activities and community and context and curriculum that recognizes the needs of Black women, that sees them not as people who need to be fixed or taught how to behave better, but understands their assets, their dreams, their aspirations. They've been able to build a model that completely shatters a lot of the preconceptions about Black women and health and longevity that exist in the public health space, because they recognized that they didn't have a shot of building a high impact model if they didn't first listen deeply and closely to the guidance and leadership of the community they wanted to support. And I think in general, that's an example, Jim, to your question, which I appreciate, but it's also meant to say that when you listen to and honor and respect the input of the communities you want to support through your philanthropy, you actually have the impact that we're all working for.
It
goes back to Carrie's point about it starts with somebody asking.
Yeah, it's a great example. And Tulaine, you use this phrase, radical humanity. Can you just elaborate on that? And because I think it speaks to this point about listening and connecting and applying how we think about this in the private sector to the public sector.
Happy to. So when I think about radical humanity, it really shouldn't have to be called radical, but I think based on some of our constructs now.
It's a good at turning a phrase.
You're right. You know, and I would say this, that we talked about this, Juliet, in our very first conversation a few weeks ago. If you look at the etymology of the word philanthropy, the root of the word means to love humankind. Like our origin story as a sector, as philanthropists, is we were designed to love humanity. And I believe that love, that's quality love. People are listening to one another and learning from one another and adapting to meet one another's needs. That's part of what love is all about. So I would say that when we talk about radical humanity, it's about recognizing that when we as philanthropists are investing and engaging in our work with organizations and community, our role is not only to give money, it's to listen and to learn, it's to provide other supports, be it inspiration, mentorship, and guidance, but it's also to look at the systems in which communities are navigating their lives. So for example, if we take a look at financial literacy, I love, Carrie, everything that you're talking about and all the work that you've been driving, it's critically important. Yet if we also at the same time look at the systems in which people are living, since the pandemic, oh sorry, something happened on my screen. Since the pandemic started, we've had over 8 million families in the US alone fall into poverty. That point came up in one of our earlier sessions.
Wow.
That's over 50,000 families a day. So some of that is about financial literacy, but some of that is about macroeconomic systems. If we take a look at the research of someone like Andre Perry from the Brookings Institution, he has a book called Know Your Price. It's a brilliant way of understanding how, for Black Americans, properties owned by Black Americans in majority Black neighborhoods, if you control for every other factor, that properties are valued at an average of 25% less than equivalent properties owned by people of racial identities. So there's systems at play. In addition to resources and education that need addressing, there's also systems at play. And I think that philanthropy that practices radical humanity acknowledges that individuals are operating within systems, and radical humanity considers the experience and knowledge of the person, but it considers with as much focus and power the context and system in which that person is living and operating.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, definitely financial literacy, it's got it. I mean, you said systems, absolutely. And actually, you know, my greatest hope through working this is trying to get every state to mandate financial education in the schools. And if every young person, before they leave, you know, the home and get this education, they're going to be on greater footing to then, you know, make sure things happen in the right way for themselves. I also, just a little sidebar thing on financial literacy. We always knew this, but we conducted a study that showed that 90% of Americans believe that the lack of financial literacy contributes to many of the social issues that we face today, including wealth inequality, gender inequality, workforce readiness, and college access. And of course, those are in a way systems that that are so important for somebody to kind of go up, you know, to have social and economic mobility.
I think I love that, Carrie, and this is not a question you have to answer real time. One of the things that I would love all of us to wrestle with on this call, not just the panelists, but everybody tuning in, thank you for being with us, is how we do two things simultaneously. How we do our best to educate and teach and expose and provide access in a way that can level the playing field, while also, based on our positions of power that we hold, shifting the context that makes Black-owned properties valued at 25% less than white-owned properties, shifting the context that has what has enabled 8 million families to slip into poverty in less than 1 calendar year in this country, while some circles and communities have experienced an acceleration of wealth. Like, to really be willing as philanthropists to address both dimensions, the individual, the sort of knowledge-based needs, and also the systems reform and systems change needs. I think it's complex, but it's really exciting when we dig our sort of hands into the work.
Yeah.
What role, Carrie and Tulaine, what role in this COVID crisis, that 8 million number is staggering, Tulaine. What role should philanthropy play, could philanthropy play, and what role should government programs play in keeping what is the core of this country economically, culturally, socially intact? That is the small business community. We've lost tens of thousands of small businesses and likely to lose many more. I'm concerned about what does that do for our communities? What does that do for the psyche of those people who are the people who just get things done?
I think it's a great question. I mean, I think we should all wrestle with this a bit. Carrie, I mean, it looked like you were trying to jump in.
No, you know, we all have to be involved. We all, I mean, the government can't do everything, nor can nonprofit, nor can business. I mean, the bottom line is we all have to step up. Yeah. I mean, I think, and Tulaine, you sort of alluded to this. I really do believe it all starts with education. I mean, that's the bottom line. I don't mean necessarily financial education. I mean, you know, all around, you know, literacy and math literacy and so forth. That's where it starts. So that's definitely a government, you know, area to focus on. But again, we can all bring something to the table. You know, like for instance, I keep bringing back financial literacy because that's where my expertise is. But, you know, I always think about Michelle Obama when she took on child obesity as her cause. Mm-hmm. And she and maybe 3 years into their administration, or I don't know, 4 years, whatever it was. Well, first of all, she got everybody. It was she used her platform, her federal platform, and nonprofits and businesses and schools, everybody rose, you know, and families took part in this. I mean, even, you know, I'm on the National Board of Boys and Girls Club and soon to be the chair, and I think next month. And they were very focused, very scalable organization that serves almost 5 million children. So but what happened is after about 4 years, it was in the newspaper, there was a headline that child obesity had gone down. And I thought, wow, you take on any social issue. Of course, I was thinking financial literacy, and we bring all sectors of society together. and we can really make change. And that was in a few years. It was in a few years. So that's an example.
Carrie, in your example of taking on sort of financial literacy, and I think it's financial inclusion as well, right? There was a question from Oliver Grant, sort of talking about that and how we can have proper balance with profits and educating society. Could you share a bit more about your work in the financial literacy and inclusion space? Because I know it's really one that you're tackling head on.
Yeah. So the way we do it, and our foundation is not huge. We are, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, all those, Chase, they're 10 times our size. So we have to be really scrappy. And that's why I focus on financial literacy. There's so many issues I'd love to focus on, but when you say financial literacy, I mean, it's the same as knowing personal finance, financial capability, financial inclusion. It's just having the knowledge and the behaviors to make a difference in your life. And so the way we have done it, again, being scrappy, is always through national partnerships. So Boys and Girls Club, we've been their partner for 18 years. We've had well over 1 million teens go through our Money Matters program. We have scholarships and all sorts of programs that go along with nurturing that program. But what we have found is those teens who have gone through the program are more likely to seek out going to college and, looking for scholarships, grants, and going to college. That to me is social or economic mobility right there in front of us. And then sort of fast forward, we've had other partnerships. We actually had one with AARP for a while, trying to get the 50 and over. I mean, that's another social issue that's, that's we're facing or gonna be facing because people aren't saving for their retirement. But fast forward, we're now also a national partner with Donors Choose, donorschoose.org, which is an organization that provides funding to public school teachers all over America. And they match private donors with teachers' needs, and we pay for or match all the requests for financial literacy. So we're in all 50, we're providing resources to all 50 states around, and tens of thousands of teachers around the country. So the way we do it is we look for scale. And of course, now with technology, it's going to help us even more.
Yeah. Jim, how do you decide where you commit your philanthropy? I mean, I know some of it's sort of a very personal thing, but how do you make those decisions?
Well, we're earlier in the process, but I would say that it is personal mostly. It's where we have an interest or where we have where there's an alignment between company goals and our personal goals, and frankly, there's always a personal motivation. And Carrie, I think you're a living example of what I would tell you now, and that is, my wife and I, for years, went up to Hyannisport in Massachusetts in the fall for the Robert F. Kennedy Memorial Weekend fundraising event. There'd be a golf tournament, there'd be a big dinner under a tent at the Kennedy family property. There'd be all kinds of activities over the course of a weekend. And what I was always looking at, what I always took notice of was Ethel Kennedy, this amazing historic figure with this large brood of children, and how she used the charity not only to do the obvious, the good work of the charity, to keep the family name in front of the public and all the work that they had done and continue to do, but how she used it as a tool to keep her family together. Everybody had a job. Everybody had a responsibility within the memorial, within the fundraisers, within the charity, to bring new people to it, to exaggerate, amplify the noise of its work. And I always took notice of that. So when we got involved in a more formal set of philanthropic activities, that was always in the back of my mind. And I'm proud to say now that, the first charity that we're behind, it, like you, Carrie, more than our money, but really got the company engaged in. So I'm the oldest of 5 children. My younger brother, Chris, 10 years my junior, is the CEO of the company now. And we have a middle brother, 2 sisters and a middle brother who was born with a developmental disability. And we're very fortunate because he lives in a wonderful group home nearby us. And so he's very much a part of our family. Wasn't always the case, but it's been wonderful the last 25 years. And he's thriving there. But the fellow who started that agency, who cares now for 5,000 folks with disabilities every day, came to my brother Chris and I and said, you know, your brother should be and could be working in the community, but I can't find jobs for my guys. Can you help? And so that led to the birthing of something called Smile Farms, where it takes what we do with our day jobs with flowers and plants and brings it to our philanthropic activity. So we built greenhouses and agricultural facilities on different campuses with 8 different not-for-profit agency partners to provide work opportunities for people with developmental disabilities. So take you back to watching Ethel. I take great joy, and Juliet, you've seen it firsthand, in the fact that my son, who used to be shy, is the MC of our dinners and our golf events, and works with a great friend who's a professional speaking coach, and they both share their activities, and he's built a wonderful relationship with my son, James. To see my niece, Maggie, run a charitable event at Citi Field for a Met game every year, and see her, she is a special ed teacher, organizing all our friends and all to get 1,000 people out to a ball game in a July evening. So to see the family, the next generation, stay connected with their responsibilities was part of the myriad of motivations we've had to get involved there. But most telling for us beyond the family is to the point that Tulaine made about when people feel it and the spirit is there, and Carrie made about the impact it has on job referrals within Schwab. It's so wonderful to see these millennials who we were told are selfish, self-centered, not that interested in being engaged or involved. They live in their own world. Nonsense. They're hardworking, they're caring. And when we have an event, 50, 60 of them sign up to give their own time, their own energy, their own capabilities, and volunteer at all the events, organize new events, do our charitable visits in the summertime, organize tours for other companies to get to know our campuses and buy our goods. It has so many benefits beyond money.
Thank you for sharing that. I couldn't agree more. I want to go to the audience, and we've got another question poll for the audience around how have you changed your approach to philanthropy in 2020 or recently, whether you've started funding in new areas, started a new learning journey around diversity and inclusion, began deeper engagement, built relationships, or you haven't changed your approach. But we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And while we're waiting for those results, Tulaine, what are you hearing from other philanthropists that about this moment in time that we're in, and where do you sense mindsets changing and opportunities opening up for transformative progress?
Yeah, I hear a few themes. One, I hear just a readiness, as I mentioned earlier, to operate differently, and what that's looked like is reducing the restrictions on some of the grant making, not eliminating them completely, but reducing them, and making sure that accountability is not only about compliance, right? But that accountability is about communication, learning, and adapting practice. I've also been really struck by how many philanthropists I've spoken to who are hopeful about what's possible, but also concerned that we might, if we're not really intentional and devoted to this, we might revert back to the mean. As Jim noted in his comments earlier, there is a light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to our capacity globally to navigate and manage the impact of COVID in terms of our physical health. There's a lot more to be seen about the devastation that COVID has wreaked on our economic health. And then, what does that mean when once this has passed, this moment, the season has passed, what will we do as philanthropy to make sure that we don't kind of default back to what was familiar, but really actually accelerate our ability to practice investment in proximate leaders and inclusive philanthropy and other things that we're learning are so important in this moment of crisis.
Absolutely. And it's encouraging to see actually 57% of respondents have started a new learning journey around diversity, equality and inclusion. and 43% are saying they've built new relationships with people and organizations that are traditionally outside of your comfort zone. So how do we continue that momentum and make sure we don't revert back to the mean?
I mean, I have some thoughts and I'd love to hear from others. I mean, the relationships, I love that you all in the poll had a question about relationships. It's really hard to do effective, inclusive, high impact grant making with people, communities, and issues that you don't have proximity to or understanding of. And so much of philanthropy has operated as if success and knowledge in one sector translated into knowledge of a completely different space and a completely different community of people. So I may care deeply about criminal justice reform because, you know, I've seen Just Mercy, I've heard Brian Stevenson talk, right? I've read the new Jim Crow. And so I care deeply about this issue, but I may not have a direct set of experiences or relationships that give me a current, precise understanding of the impact of current policies and systems. So I need to build relationships with and listen to and learn from people who actually have proximity to those issues, whether it's people who have been justice impacted, who've been incarcerated, who've worked within the system. And so that question about outside of comfort zone is a critically important one. How can we seek relationships, remove barriers to building relationships with people whose identity and experiences are different from our own? I feel like if we can strengthen our capacity to do that, to build relationships with people whose identity and experience is different from our own. It may sound trite, and because we tend to minimize the significance and complexity of that. But if we do that well, proximity is going to enable us to function in a much more inclusive and equitable manner.
Carrie, yeah.
You're going to ask me. I was just going to share a little bit about, I mean, you've kind of talked about it. I mean, we have changed our philanthropy a great deal this year. You know, again, I mentioned the Schwab Volunteer Week. Now that's all been virtual. So, and we have a whole campaign around encouraging our employees to give. And, you know, we have a 2-for-1 match. We've encouraged them to learn, you know, events like this where they can learn from other philanthropists. We've hosted some big events. And then ACT. We're giving them really easy ways to volunteer virtually with either their family or their colleagues. And then, Tulaine, I think you were the one who brought it up, and that is spreading the word, around what you're doing and inspiring others. So we're really trying to encourage our employees to, you know, post on their social. But I wanted to share a couple things just because we were talking about systems and I think racial inequality, to be very specific. And a lot of companies are doing this. So I know we're not necessarily unique, but we have had, I'll call it a listening tour, where we've had sort of white champions with other black employee colleagues, and they did a panel and that we all got to listen to and share sort of their life experiences, in particular of being you know, a black colleague. And some of the things were like, oh my God, like one lived in Portland and you know, with all these protests, and she said, and we're a very congenial organization. We're very nice. We all, you know, we're a big team, but no one had asked her, how is she doing? And her husband and her son, you know, were afraid. And so it was like light bulb. And I mean, everybody's been talking about it. And so that's kind of the relationship, you know, you're talking about is going a little deeper than you might say at the workplace. That's a great opportunity. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and I shared this with you guys yesterday, but I think it's worth sharing because people hopefully are, you know, working in businesses, or they can encourage their own companies to do the same. But we're endowing 7 scholarships in 7 schools, organizations that we already have a relationship with. And we're basically giving a $10,000 scholarship to a junior and a senior who declare financial planning as their major. But in not just the money, we're doing a nurturing campaign, so that if our scholars will have access to our executives and town halls, education, internships, and we want them to get, you know, connected to us, emotionally connected with us, to want to come to Schwab. So that gets back to building close relationships. And so those are just some examples of breaking through, the barriers.
Thanks, Carrie. And there's actually a follow-up question for you. Are there partnerships that join financial literacy and jobs for teenagers?
Financial for jobs. Well, I mean, not necessarily with Schwab, although we do have internship programs. And I mentioned these scholars will have access to intern programs.
Yeah.
And Boys and Girls, our partnerships are with Boys and Girls Club and Donors Choose, and, and among some others, those are our big ones. And, we give scholarships to them, and, but they're a high school, so it's harder. We have to have mostly, people who are close to graduating from college and beyond for a lot of our jobs.
And Carrie, do you do financial literacy programs within the Boys and Girls Club?
Yeah, that's the program that we've had for about 18 years, where we've had, 1.1 million teens go through the program.
And are they, would you define them as financially literate when they finish that program?
Well, we did an evidence-based, evaluation, and while we can't, looking at a longitudinal study is a little hard to follow them through life, but there have been other studies that do that and show that yes, for instance, there's a couple of states that mandated financial literacy, and in their states, and the credit scores for the state goes up. Mm-hmm. So. I forgot what you just asked me about. Oh, so we had evidence-based, and we do see that they, it blew out with flying colors in terms of all the concepts. The idea is you compare what they knew to, or where they were and to where they are now. And yes, yeah. And I'm a big believer, so also as you talk, you hear me talk about gender, women there's not a lot of women in the finance industry, and that's been people are saying, why aren't women getting more engaged with their money? Why? I was just on with somebody the other day, and I said, it's because we don't talk about it at the family. We talk to our sons differently than our daughters, study after study. So anyway.
I was talking to someone the other day, and he said on that point, and he had opened an Ameritrade account, a stocks and shares account for his son, and then suddenly it dawned on him that he hadn't done the same for his daughter. And it was like, well, my son was like asking me, and then he suddenly realized, he was like, that's immediately kind of guiding like the guys down the financial route, and the daughter's not. So yeah, he was sort of fortunately realizing it, and was sort of then trying to have the same conversation with his daughter.
Yeah, and I just to round that comment out is that you think, that we've come such a long way, but our most recent study of 16 to 25-year-olds, twice as many young men as young women have accounts. Have investment accounts. Yeah. And we'll ask them, if we gave you $1,000, what would you do with it? Twice as many as the young men said that they would invest it. So that's a whole nother social issue that, I think starts at the family, the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Like that data that you just shared is remarkable. It's a little surprising to me, because I think, Carrie, I've had this sort of notion like, oh, we progressed so much around some of these issues when it comes to gender. No illusions that we have arrived, but I think we have progressed more than that. So it reminds me again of like, you can't heal what you don't feel. And I do think that as philanthropists and business leaders, part of what we should do, in my opinion, is get just very curious about what is the current state of things, like to not sort of default to our kind of generalized perception, but to really do some research, and you don't have to become a PhD in specific issues, but to, reach out to people in your network. There's going to be someone in your network like Carrie who can give you some really important data points about the current state of affairs when it comes to financial literacy and the financial literacy afforded females. And so like reach out and get that data. I think sometimes we operate as if our perceptions are true, but the data does not bear that out in so many cases. So that was really helpful.
Yeah, we just have to be open to learning, which it sounds like this audience is. Mm-hmm. Sure, just by being here today.
Juliet, you and I have chatted a lot about a concern we share, which is before the pandemic, we had spoken a lot, written about, researched a lot about this epidemic of loneliness. And it continues, and I think COVID is an accelerant. And I think there are other mental health issues that, Tulaine, you shone a light on earlier in your comments about what you're concerned about going through COVID, the isolation, and that 95% of your people, Carrie, at Schwab are working remotely. That has a consequence. It has a consequence on loneliness. It has a consequence on a broader mental health stage. So my question to you, Tulaine, to start is, I think there's a silver lining here. And the silver lining is that as we focus more on ourselves and our circumstance, I think there'll be a reawakening of an interest in people in connecting. And one of the most effective ways that we can connect is through the work that you both do, and the work that you both incent and make feasible financially, the philanthropic work, because it's the greatest way to connect. And I didn't pay that much attention when I was in school, but I was a psychology major in City University, John Jay, New York. And I remember studying a psychologist from back in the 30s or 40s. His name was Claude Steiner. And he spoke about the contact economy. And what he said was, unlike any other bank account, the more you spend from this particular account, the more you have. And the more we give. So my hope is that the silver lining is that programs like you fund and discover and build and nurture, both of you, in the work that you do, will be part of the salvation as we come out the other end of this, of people gravitating toward inclusion and involvement, because we need it as much as we give. And I think it's, if I could encourage people who are feeling, doing a little psychological first aid, is a good friend of ours at Worth, Dr. George Everly, says, you know, when you were saying something earlier, Tulaine, I just wrote down, paraphrase what he says, which is something along the lines of connectivity. Connectivity exaggerates the good and divides the bad. So when you're feeling good and you're connected to people, it's amplified. And when you're feeling down and you're connected with a good network of people, it spreads it out so you don't have to carry the burden yourself. And it's all about connectivity. And then he goes on to say in his most recent writing, and just his words ring in my head, he's a wonderful man. He's at Johns Hopkins. And he said, right now, we should each be investing in the relationships we have. We should be looking to reconnect with relationships that have faded or waned. And we should be looking to create the relationships we've always dreamed of.
Yes.
And now there's no better time than now to do that. And each of you are creating connection opportunities for people. And the byproduct of that connection is doing good for others. So it's this virtuous cycle that you guys incite and incent every day that I think gives us great hope for what the good that can come from this. And I just hope we see evidence of that real soon.
Hey, Jim, I was just going to say, I know there's studies that show that philanthropy is equated to a healthier life. And so I just, for the audience, want to remind them, just think chips and wine.
You're just making fun of two of my many weaknesses.
Yeah, those are mine. That's why I mean that. You know, it's when you start, you
Thank
can't.
God Juliet has none of those weaknesses.
Oh no, I do. Believe me. Unfortunately, we need to wrap this up. And Tulaine, I just want to invite a final few words from you before we close. But this was a really wonderful conversation.
Absolutely. It's been such a pleasure, and I'm excited to continue the conversation with all of you. You know, the bottom line, and Jim, this is what you were speaking to, is that we as human beings need each other. And we have been, in many cases, kind of led to separate ourselves based on identity, experience, economic story, et cetera. And what this difficult year has given us is an opportunity to just completely move beyond that, to just shatter the notion that if you don't look like me, live like me, think like me, I cannot have a meaningful relationship with and connection to you. So I just am so encouraged, because I do think the time is now to actually transform. I didn't get to say what I was grateful for. One of the things I'm grateful for is to be alive at this time. because I do believe that this is the season where we will actually make good on the promise of this great experiment of democracy that we are, moving forward in this part of the world and hopefully all over the planet. So I'm encouraged and hope the conversations will continue for all of you who've tuned in with us today.
Absolutely. And I think
Juliet, we have to end. I'm running out of paper for the
I'm
notes I'm
sorry,
taking here.
I know. Well, the good news is we are going to do another one of these series, and we have one last poll question for the audience on how valuable you felt this first education series was, as we look at how we do this next year. So please do answer that. Carrie, Jim, and Tulaine, thank you so much. I personally have learned so much through this series, and I think it's just interesting talking about connectivity, and it's given me the opportunity to connect with people that I wouldn't have necessarily had the opportunity to without this. So I just want to say thanks so much for being part of this conversation. I also wanted to say a special thank you to New Profit and Sam and Sarah and Lizzie and the team for being our partner for this series, and to you, Tulaine. And most importantly, thanks to all of you that have joined us for this series and for your great questions. The engagement has been wonderful. We'd love to hear any comments you have. You can email us at community@worth.com. And also, if you're thinking about your philanthropic efforts right now and you would like to talk to someone about it, we're offering a complimentary consultation on your philanthropic endeavours. And we'll set that up with you, and you can connect with someone at the New Profit team just to talk about it and have a discovery call on it. So again, email us at community@worth.com to arrange that, and we can connect you. For all of our other events, please tune into worth.com/events and sign up for our weekly newsletter as well. In the meantime, really wish I know it will be different, wishing everyone a restful rest of the week and Thanksgiving with friends and family, and stay well and stay healthy and be kind and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you everyone so much.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Be well. Stay hopeful, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.